Are you buying what Pete Carroll's saying, that there's no issue between them?
No, I'm not buying it. Because when you say there's a difference between saying the relationship is good and healthy and there are no hard feelings. In other words, hard feelings can sometimes be part of a good and healthy relationship. Pete Carroll's coaching style, the culture that he creates, the way he creates chemistry or allows chemistry to flourish is by letting guys be themselves. And you see that with Seattle, with all of those guys. It's why Seattle's the most interesting team in terms of listening to guys' quotes and following the little melodramas, because he lets strong personalities be strong personalities. But that's not the same thing as even if you've resolved it and say, okay, now we're going to move forward, and because of that communication, the relationship is solid, that may be, but that doesn't mean there are no hard feelings. Richard Sherman, look, this is a team where suddenly Marshawn Lynch doesn't want to come back for them. I know he's from the Bay Area and all that stuff, and he wanted to play for the Raiders. And all of a sudden they're shopping Richard Sherman. This is not just, anyone on our team's available. Fine. This was more than that. There's a reason this became a major news story. One of the best defensive players in the game in his prime is being shopped by the closest thing the NFC has to the Patriots. So if you're Richard Sherman, even as a professional and an educated guy and a smart guy and a competitive, you may know, well, this is the way the business goes. Fine. But don't tell me there are no hard feelings. Something, to me, is going on in Seattle now that's a little bit different than it was a couple of years ago. Not saying they can't overcome it, but there's something going on.
When I've spoken to Richard Sherman, his mentality is that, listen, business is business. He understands it. Pete Carroll's one of those dudes that successfully goes about the business of ingratiating himself with his players. When you look at the way that Richard Sherman was last year, if he has a problem with anybody, it's going to be with the general manager, Mr. Schneider, simply because of the personnel they've had in the secondary with them. Now, obviously, they've been an elite defense. We understand that. They were number 3 ranked defense last year overall, number 8 against the pass. Richard Sherman was still considered to be one of the top 5 corners in the game of football. So we understand that with 50% or less of their passes being completed in his direction. But the reality is clear. This is not the same Legion of Boom team that we revered for so many years. Whether it's due to injuries, a holdout by Cam Chancellor, the retirement of Marshawn Lynch, who Richard Sherman is pretty cool with, the manner in which they lost that Super Bowl. I've said on many occasions that the manner in which they lost the Super Bowl, there simply was no excuse for the Seattle Seahawks to be at the half-yard line against the New England Patriots a couple of years ago and not give beast mode Marshawn Lynch that football. It was never going to be the same after that, because there's no reason to make that call unless you wanted Russell Wilson to be the hero instead of beast mode. And that's something that resonates not only with beast mode, but with some of the players on that squad. But having said all of that, in the end, Pete Carroll can coach. He's a good dude. He's very gifted in cultivating relationships with players, and I don't think there's hard feelings. I think they understand that it's business. It would be hard feelings if you sent them to a scrub team. But if Richard Sherman ultimately got traded to somebody that was a contender and he just doesn't happen to be in Seattle anymore, I don't think he's the kind of individual that would have a problem with that. I'll pass it off to Darren Woodson, who I am happy to see, but I am very shocked to see on this particular segment, because he is a cowboy and he has no business talking about anything else.
We got to go there.
But I understand.
We got to go with that. Listen, I get this. You said it. You just said it a few minutes ago, Stephen A. Listen, this started to splinter off when they didn't convert on that 4th and inches or whatever it was 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. That's when it started. And we saw it bleed into the next season where Richard Sherman went right on. He went at Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator, during the game, because they were down low in the red zone, and they threw the ball again, and Richard Sherman went at Darrell Bevell. And then they saw it again just this past year when he went at Chris Richard, his defensive coordinator. That's when it started. So there's been a problem. Is there a problem in that locker room? Absolutely. And I understand Pete Carroll is the guy that can get all these players and these alpha dogs into one room, and he can figure out a way to get them in a winning pattern and get these guys all confident and understand how to play this game. But at the same time, right now there's a lot going on in this locker room, and Max hit it on the head. I mean, when do you ever let your number one guy, and I would say, outside of Russell Wilson, Richard Sherman is your biggest asset on your football team. when are you shopping him around? When you start shopping your number one or number two guy around, then there's problems. There's something
Darren,
else. There's
really
underlying problems.
Darren, that's really interesting. You're saying that because clearly there's a change, and many people have pointed to that moment in the Super Bowl. They should have won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We all agree. You give beast mode the ball, you win the Super Bowl. But you're saying that is the perception you feel that Richard Sherman is the ringleader in terms of the discontent and hasn't let that go, and as a result, they wanted to move on, turn the page from him?
I'm not saying he's the ringleader. I'm saying this is a veteran football team, especially the Legion of Boom. Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and these guys are just players on the football field. These guys are close-knit off the field. They hang out closely together. And I can see them still being frustrated from what happened in that Super Bowl loss, absolutely. And I can still see some things probably going on in that locker room where Richard Sherman hasn't been happy. If you want to call him the ringleader, probably has not been happy. And the coaching staff is looking at the same picture and saying, maybe it's time to part ways. And that's the feeling I have now. Can they overcome all this? Absolutely, because Richard Sherman understands the business of football. He's going to come out and play 100%, regardless of the situation. He's going to come out and play 100%. But there are some underlying issues in that locker room.